Wall-E is considered by most to be one of the best movies Pixar's ever made. I even did a whole video explaining why I personally believe the movie to be their magnum opus, which you can find a link in the description too. But even a movie as great as this does have its fair share of debated elements to it, and one of the more interesting ones is its villain, Otto. Because his thought process is put in a somewhat ambiguous light, it's been the subject of much speculation as to whether or not he has any control over his actions, or if he's just a machine following his flawed programming. And because of that, some have even tried to argue that he isn't a villain at all. And today, I'd like to explore this topic to the best of my ability. Can Otto actually be considered a true villain when the circumstances behind his actions are taken into account, or not? And there will be even more spoilers for Wall-E ahead, so in case you don't want anything else ruined, you should really consider turning off the video. Okay, so the biggest reason some have argued that Otto isn't actually a true villain mainly comes down to that he can't ignore his programming and prime directive, which would be a pretty good argument if it weren't for the fact that the entire movie is about robots learning to ignore their programming and gaining humanity and sentience through mental evolution. And what's especially interesting to note in this regard is that Otto, as well as his henchman Gopher, are the only robots in the entire movie that are shown to follow their programming to the letter. Every other machine the movie dedicates any time to is shown to be able to evolve and eventually ignore their programming under the right influence, with that usually being Wall-E. So as a result, it can be argued that it isn't so much that Otto can't ignore his programming, but more so that he refuses to. And the biggest indicator of this possibly being true is that not only does he refuse to listen to the captain's arguments, but at his counterpoint to almost everything he says is that humanity is safer in space. In other words, after over 700 years of keeping humanity blissfully unaware of any hardship, Otto might have come to the conclusion at some point that his orders weren't simply orders, but genuinely what was right for the human race. And because that's what he's based his whole mindset on, defaults to it whenever the subject of Earth is brought up. Because if it's his job to keep humanity safe before anything else, and by his logic Earth is not safe and will only lead to hardship, then the best thing he can do would be to keep them as far away from it as possible. As I just said, it could be more that his orders validate his way of thinking, rather than them being what dictates his actions in and of themselves. Now, some might even try to take this a step further by saying that his actions could be hiding something more selfish, because aboard the Axiom, he's in complete and total control of everything. He's literally the most important thing on the ship apart from the main computer. So looking at it that way, he could be using his orders as an excuse to not go back to Earth, because if humanity did recolonize the planet, all of his power and importance would be stripped away. They wouldn't need him now that they weren't living on the ship, and after a while would become totally obsolete. Now, it is possible that a need for control, or at least self-preservation, could be what's motivating him, but it's pretty unlikely that he's capable of such complex thinking. If there's anything more behind his actions than his orders, it's probably just that he thinks he's genuinely doing the right thing. And as I already said, this could be backed up not only by his default argument with the captain, but also how passionate he gets in trying to prevent them from getting back to Earth. He might actually believe that he's saving the entire human race from a deadly mistake, and thus could explain why he keeps taking such drastic measures. But to be fair, that is all just speculation and can't be supported by anything in the actual narrative. But even if he is just following orders, a case can still be made that it's born out of a desire not to evolve beyond his programming, rather than just his being a machine unable to think outside the bounds of what it was made to do and think. Because once again, every other machine in the movie is shown to be capable of evolving and eventually have a purpose beyond their programming. So the fact that Otto doesn't lends credibility to the idea that it's his choice not to think beyond his orders. And if that is indeed the case, then that does make him a villain, because he's actively choosing not to listen to reason and stubbornly follow outdated orders, even when it could be detrimental to the human race. But let's assume that he simply can't ignore his programming and has no ability to achieve sentience unlike the other robots. Then that still makes him a villain for that exact reason. He's been carrying out outdated orders no matter how much harm it's evidently doing, and absolutely will not stop until those orders are satisfied to the letter, even if in spirit he's achieved the opposite of what was intended. Because the whole point of not returning to Earth was to keep humanity alive and safe. And by the end of the movie, in his quest to carry out his orders not to return to Earth, he's become a bigger threat to humanity than Earth could ever be. As I even said in the aforementioned video, if there was ever a character that perfectly encapsulated the concept of ignorance, Otto would be it. Seriously, his depiction is so accurate, intentionally or not, that it would make the likes of Charles Dickens very proud. He carries out his orders without question, all the while completely oblivious to all the harm he's doing. And when it's finally pointed out to him, he simply defaults back to what he's already been told and refuses to deviate from it or even entertain the possibility that the captain could be right. He's as close-minded as you can possibly get, and perfectly shows why being too stubborn and ignorant can only lead to destruction. Because I dedicated a whole other video to, which you can also find a link in the description to. Ignorance is never a good thing and will only ever lead to problems no matter what some people say. And that leads to yet another reason why Otto should be considered a villain, since he's pretty much the exact opposite of the movie's hero, Wall-E. Because while Wall-E is a curious little robot that instills humanity in everybody he comes across, Otto is a machine in every sense of the word, carrying out every order given to completion and going to extremes to see to it that humanity keeps living its detached existence. In my video on Pixar plot twist villains, which you can also find a link in the description to, I even compared him to an anti-Terminator, and he's just as much an anti-Wall-E as well, because everything the little guy represents is what Otto seeks to destroy, and his various attempts to murder Wall-E are the perfect metaphor for how he's trying to destroy the humans' desire to regain their humanity. Frankly, no matter which way you try to frame it, Otto is most definitely the villain of the story, both for his desire to keep humanity from rediscovering who they are, as well as the irrational lengths he goes to achieve that. Now, as I noted before, and to once again be fair here, there are various ways to interpret Otto's actions, from him simply being a machine following orders, to a robot that genuinely believes his directives are what's right for humanity, to a selfish autopilot trying to preserve his own existence, power, and self-importance. But no matter which interpretation you abide by, none of that changes the fact that his actions, as well as what motivates them, still make him a villain. Though some of those ideas might make him more sympathetic and tragic, yes, but they still make him a villain. Because in the end, no matter what the true motivation behind his actions were, Otto was a machine that had taken his orders way too far and needed to be shut down before he became exactly what he had been programmed to protect humanity from. So while he may not be Pixar's most well-known bad guy, and his villainy is there more to serve the plot than anything else, there's no question that the character of Otto was intended to be a villain, no matter which way you look at him. Alright, I think I've made my point here. So now why don't all of you tell me? Do you believe that Otto is most definitely a villain, and a perfectly done one for the story Wall-E was trying to tell at that? Or do you still believe that his inability to ignore his programming keeps him from being deserving of that distinction? Please let me know in the comments below. And you don't have to agree with any of the speculation or opinions I offered up in this video if you don't want to. You can feel about Otto and how much he should be truly considered a villain any way you'd like, and nobody can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.